Well, this is the hydraulic pump drive. There's a story about getting that out of the main frame, but we'll talk about that later. Right now I got it out and I got it apart. Some interesting things about that. These are 5/16 12 points bolts. Four of them. I'm going to have to check and see what the torque specs are on these, but these were really in there tight. A grade 8 5/16, I believe the torque is for grade 8 is about 29 pounds, foot-pounds. Grade 5 it's about 22, 23, something in that area. But those were tight. And then the shaft, they have two nuts with a locking washer, but they threw it down on here against the bearing to set the preload, but they were just finger tight. They were just held in with this washer that's been bent both ways. Engages a slot in the shaft. So the manual, I'll have to look through the shop manual again, but it's very sparse or scarce on information a lot of times. But this is the lower housing where the seal goes in. What I had to do is I had to take the seal and use a socket and drive it down, actually bend the seal in on itself enough so I could get a punch in there at an angle enough that I could drive out the bearing race out of its bore, because you have to take that, as you can see, the seal will not fit through the bearing race. So that was fun. But I got it out, so I'm going to put it back together and see what other trouble I can get into. One other thing I was going to add, the old seal was really brittle. I'm glad I went to the trouble to replace it, but it's I don't know if you heard that, but it's brittle enough it cracks. So that piece is a little better, but the lips themselves were really brittle. So that was just a leak waiting to happen. Well, I got it back together. As far as I can tell, the nuts are in the same position they were. I just basically finger tight the bottom one and put the retainer on, and it fit. And I put the top one on and tightened it a little over finger tight, and just bent the retaining washer up. But it's tighter than it was before. I attribute that to a lot of the seal drag. That's a double seal. Those are pretty heavy seals, so I think we'll be all right. Time will tell. Put the two new O-rings in it and continue putting it back together. The hydraulic pump drive is back together. I did some checking. I found in the tractor specifications pamphlet or book that these four 12-headed bolts are to be torqued to 35 foot-pounds. They're actually 170,000 yield bolt. They're a very high strength bolt. So that's way above the normal torque for a 5/16 bolt. On the gear, there are some two teeth are marked with X's. Here, this tooth and this tooth. You can just pick them out. They have to mate with the gear that is driven off the PTO shaft. The mark is right on this tooth, but I'll try to get better light in there, but it's very hard to see. I was talking about a surprise I discovered when I took this drive out. You probably can't see, but on the bottom of that brass T, there are deep gouges. I'll demonstrate how the assembly goes in, and you'll see where those gouges came from. So the pump goes in. And it's kind of a, there we go. I got it to slip past that T, but in the casting, there's some areas that you have to tilt the back of the housing down and lift the gear up. And the problem was it was impacting on that brass T on the bottom. This housing had been out once before. I could tell because the teeth were missmashed. The alignment of the teeth was off by one tooth. I can imagine they must have pried this thing out to get it. It was really stuck in there. I could not get it out. I used a pry bar and lifted that T up. Now that T is part of the lubricating system from the lubrication pump. This tube here has a couple holes or nozzles in it that spray oil down onto the top of the housing. You can just see a conical shaped area and a hole. Lubrication gets into the bottom bearing there. So, and also when you install this, there are shims that are in it. This tractor has 3 shims. They are used to set the backlash between these two gears. There's a procedure in the manual on how to do that, being some not. And I imagine if you change one gear, you have to change them both. Apparently they are lapped to reduce vibration while running, and then the teeth are marked to show the proper orientation. And according to the manual, the mark, they line up every 6 rotations as the tooth walks around the one gear. So I'll pull this off, and the manual calls for putting a little bit of Permatex type substance on the inside of these shims. That's the only protection. There's no gasket, there's no O-rings, no seals, nothing. But you do have 2 finely machined surfaces. The bolts are fairly large. There's 4 of them that hold that housing in. So apparently the pressure and a little bit of Permatex and the smoothness of everything is what keeps the assembly from leaking. Well, I have the pump fully installed and torqued, and I have the teeth lined up on the 2 gears, so we're good there. One thing, if you're working on this, there's a coupling that goes in there. Just want to make sure you don't lose it. I don't know why the splines do that. There we go. And I did get the PTO housing, the lubrication line in. The lubrication line is fed oil from through that T to here. This goes back to the PTO, and this goes out of the frame to where the oil filter is mounted, and then the oil gets the oil filter through the delivery tube coming from the pump. There are orifices in these lines. There's some of these fittings have orifices in them to control the flow of oil. I don't believe this one was. This one is drilled on the bottom with 2 holes, but I believe this one and this one do have orifices. And the PTO gets full flow. So, all right. One thing I replaced was the cab door lock. You can see the old one had a pretty good crack in it. With grandchildren and people driving this in the future, that's not something you want to scrimp on as far as having someone fall out the cab because the door opened up. But I got the new lock on. Just like a bank vault. I like that.